Did you watch Arcane 1 a while ago, didn't have time to watch it again and now you kinda forgot what happened there? Which is crucial before watching Arcane 2? Well, don't worry, because today we are recapping the entire story of Arcane 1, and we'll pay extra attention to all the details that might be important for Arcane 2. So let's get on it! Episode 1 starts with the infamous bridge scene, where Jinx and Vi are shown as kids and their parents died, meaning that they are orphans. From that point on, Vander stops fighting and kinda becomes their adoptive father. Vi and Powder then climb the rooftops of Piltover, which sets up the scene for the entirety of Arcane, and Powder says an interesting line that might be worth remembering. One day, I'm going to ride one of these things. Anyway, together the group breaks into Jace's lab. Here, Powder is set up as an artificer, or someone who knows engineering. Soon after that, they find a Hextech crystal and the entire lab blows up. This is followed by a chase scene where they are escaping the wardens, and they bump into Silco's goons. A fight breaks out, Jinx manages to escape, which is where she makes her first bomb, which fails and does nothing. Meanwhile, the rest of the bad gang got beaten, so the group then continues down to Zone, which is where Milo calls Powder a Jinx. After this, Vander is set up as the godfather of the underground. And we get our first look at Huck, our friendly merchant. Vander gets mad at the kids for trying to pull off these dangerous jobs. And here it is revealed that they learned about the lab from Little Man. So Vander insists that they stay out of Piltover's business, and he tells Vi that violence is not the way to go forward. Powder then finds her first chomper teeth in the garbage, which is where she realized she didn't lose all the crystals. So next, Vander and Clagger visit Benzo's. This is a shop absolutely full of Easter eggs. Here, as Vander and Benzo talk about what happened, he touches his forearm as he says that wardens are not the worst enemy out there. Which is where we learned that it was Jace who shopped at Benzo's and Little Man, who we know is Echo, followed him, which is how they knew where the lab was. Shortly after that, the wardens arrive, which is where Marcus and Grayson are introduced for the first time. Of course, they are looking for whoever blew up the crystal in Piltover, and here it is revealed that Vander and Grayson had a deal. Piltover and Zone would stay out of each other's business. The scene then goes to Powder in her bed as she's drawing faces on her inventions with crayons, foreshadowing all the sprays and tags. So with a bit of free time, Powder and Vi return back to the rooftops. Here, Vi shows Powder her bunny, which got stuck above the streets. It was thrown up there by a bully. Powder then shows Vi the crystal she had. Vi tells her to keep it a secret and she says the line, "One day this city is going to respect us." After which the scene goes to Silco's lab. It is revealed that the gang member known as Deckard was indeed Silco's goon, and Singed is introduced for the first time as a scientist working on Shimmer. And here, during his first experiment, he jacks up a rat with Shimmer and possibly creates Twitch, we still don't know. And Silco hints that Deckard possibly volunteered to be the next experiment. Which is where we get to episode 2. We get Jace's perspective on the explosion that happened in Piltover. We learned that his experiments were funded by the Kiraman family, which is where Caitlyn is from. Here, the big explosion knocked Jace down and he started remembering his childhood. Here we see young Jace and his mother in harsh environment. They are about to die, but suddenly a mage appears who is or isn't possibly Rise. Using a ruined gem, he teleports them both to safety, and he gives the exhausted gem to Jace to remember that moment. Here, just remember that epic shot of the mage holding the world, that scene might come back. Anyway, Grayson then interrogates Jace in his exploded lab. And Victor is introduced as an assistant to the head of the council. He was brought here to remove anything dangerous, which included Jace. And so, Jace is taken into custody. In his jail, Heimerdinger visits him to talk about the dangerous experiments. Here, Jace reveals he is trying to control magic. And Heimerdinger tells him that Arcane is dangerous. And when he gets before the council, he is advised to not even mention magic. Which is where the scene cuts into Vi at the arcade practicing her fighting, while the rest of the group just plays the different games. And it is revealed that Powder is really good with guns. Not too long after that, the wardens invade the arcade, still looking for whoever caused the explosion. Of course, at that point, Powder has the gems, so they all flee. Here, just pay attention to all the different games as well as this specific chomper. It might appear in Arcane 2 again. But in the end, Echo is the one who helps them all escape. In the next scene, Mel is introduced as the richest person in Piltover. However, she is still the poorest Medarda. And it is mentioned that they have a deal with the Pharaoh's family. I don't believe this is ever brought up in Arcane 1 again, but the Pharaoh's family is indeed Camille's house. Here it is revealed that Mel wants to expand her power, and so she is going to focus on the possible gains from Jace's trial. It then cuts to the Kiraman family, who is also talking about Jace's trial. There, they simply want to support Jace. Now back in Zaun, people want to fight. They are sick of all the wardens constantly invading their places, which is where Savika appears for the first time and she tells Vander that he looks weak, after which she just leaves. So Vander refuses to fight, and Echo tells Vi about the deal Vander has with the wardens. Now back in Piltover, the trial is about to begin, and Mel starts to gain favors with birthday gifts. During this trial, some counselors want to punish Jace, which is what pressured Jace into spilling the beans and telling everyone that he is trying to create magic. This shocks everyone, and my favorite counselor, Balbok, gives us some lore. He believes that arcane magic is a curse and it nearly annihilated his race. Of course, Heimerdinger knows how dangerous magic is for mortals, and the show shows how much experience he really has. And he uses this to shut down Jace's speech. He remembers times when magic was in the hands of mortals, which is possibly teasing Tyrus, former master of Rise. Here it is also revealed that Piltover was founded to escape the warmongering of mages, which again is likely referencing the Rune Wars. Anyway, they want to banish Jace, but eventually his mother speaks for him. So then a vote happens, and in the end he only gets expelled from the academy. Balbok and the other two counselors are still against him and they want to banish him, but the Kiraman family, Heimerdinger, Mel, and the one person she swayed with the birthday gift voted in Jace's favor. Which was the point Mel started to snowball her power. Later, Marcus gets invited by Silco into his hideout, where the two make a deal that comes back later. Then Victor and Heimerdinger hide all of Jace's research, but secretly Victor takes Jace's notebook to continue his work. Back in Silco's hideout, we see all the sea monsters below Zaun, which is also where he gives Deckard Shimmer and he turns him into a Hulk. After being expelled from the academy, Jace then visits the Kiraman family, who always supported him, and he learns their gates are close to him now. Back in the council, everyone is mad and they wanna turn Zaun upside down. All while the wardens are trying to not press Zaun while looking for Powder and Vi. Regardless, the wardens enter the last drop, which is Vander's pub. So Vander starts the secret alarm and Vi's group hides. Here, Marcus tells Vander he met with Silco, and he teased that in the past, Vander was not always the peacemaker he is now. But in the end, the wardens leave the pub without finding anything. After they leave, Vi reveals she wants to fight. Vander wants to calm her down, and so they visit the bridge. Here we get quick audio flashbacks of the previous battles that happened here, and it is revealed that Vander led those fights. And he asks Vi if she wants to fight, is she willing to lose Milo, Clagger or Powder? When Vi asks what he's gonna do, she is surprised to hear that Vander doesn't really have a plan. Back in Jace's destroyed lab, Jace attempts to kill himself. But Victor interrupts him. He tells him that he admires his work, and he reveals that he came from Zaun and he wants to continue his work. Back in the last drop, after her talk with Vander, Vi took in the situation and now she appreciates her entire group. Meanwhile, a message from Vander arrived at the Wardens. Off-screen, Powder took down Vi's bunny, the Wardens then march into Banzos, and it is teased that the Wardens are about to take Vi, which is where we jump into the next episode. At the beginning of episode 3, Silco has a flashback. There, he is dropping into the waters below Piltover. He is willing to drown, but his head wants to fight. And that will to fight was given to him by his old friend, Vander. So, it then cuts to Vi waiting for the Wardens, revealing that Vi was the one who sent the message to the Wardens. She wanted to turn herself in, but Vander found her first. Which is where we got the famous line, "You got a good heart, don't ever lose it." After which, Vander shoves Vi into the cellar and turns himself in. Grayson is shocked because she knows without Vander, Zaun is screwed. But they don't have another choice, so together they walk out. Which is where Silco appears with Shimmered Deckard, who then kills Grayson and Benzo. but he leaves Vander and Marcus alive after Silco changed the deal. Back in Piltover, Victor and Jace continue the research. Jace hints that they have to crank the machine, possibly teasing Blitzcrank, who should be at least referenced somewhere down the storyline. To prove their theory, they realize they have to get the crystal from Heimerdinger's lab, and Victor suggests they sneak in. A bit later on, Echo walks into the cellar to free Vi, who witnessed everything that Silco did. Thankfully, Echo saw where they took Vander. It was in the Shimmer Supply Lab. Here Silco reveals he wants to fight the Wardens to free Zone from the oppression. He trusted Vander in the past, but eventually Vander betrayed him. And now we know Vander never forgave himself for that. Also, Silco's eye was destroyed by zoonite toxins in the water. Silco then drags Vander to his chair to infuse him with Shimmer. Savika then comes back and it is revealed she is now on Silco's side. Back in Piltover, Victor and Jace break into Heimerdinger's office. Mel catches them, but since it is Jace, she still gives them a chance to prove their work. Down in Zone, Vi then catches up with the rest of the group and she tells everyone what happened, which is where the mission to rescue Vander begins. But she tells Powder not to follow them because she's not ready yet. And she gives her the blue torch and she tells her to light it when she needs Vi. Inside Heimerdinger's lab, Victor and Jace now crank the machine. Moments later, Jinx has a mental breakdown. She almost threw the gems to the ground, which would definitely kill her. That made her realize the gems can be turned into bombs. And she can use the bombs to help them. Anyway, in the lab, the crank worked. However, now the crystals are still unstable. Down in Zone, Vi finds Vander and they start to get him out. But Silco sees them and so a fight begins. Which is where Vi fights a really known enemy for the first time. Also, she beats the rest and the group successfully starts to get Vander out. When Silco starts losing, he unleashes Deckard again. Of course, Vi can't win that fight and so she flees, locking the entire group inside the cell together with Vander. Back in Piltover, Victor and Jace stabilize the crystal, they created magic, and Mel is happy to see she successfully gained more power through Jace. Down in Zone, Powder finds the rest of the group and she tries to help. She releases the monkey to kill Deckard and she kills everyone. She destroyed Savika's arm, she burned Singed, and overall, this is just quite an infamous scene, isn't it? Soon after that, Vander sees what happened, and for the first time in a while, he decides to fight again. He fights Deckard, he gets stabbed in the back by Silco, Vander then grabs Silco and he gets a flashback of the two of them fighting in the past. As a result of this stabbing and fighting with Deckard, Vander falls onto a pile of Shimmer and drinks it. After getting jacked up, he goes back to Deckard and kills him. He also sees Vi, who calms him down, and he saves her. Unfortunately, Vander still dies, and he tells Vi to take care of Powder, which is when Powder arrives. She realizes what she did, and she has an absolute mental breakdown. Vi slaps her, she leaves her behind, and calls her a jinx. Powder is left there to cry in all the chaos, which is where Silco arrives. He picks up Powder, he reflects in her story, and he takes care of her. Before Vi realizes what happened and she intervenes, she is taken in by Marcus, which is where Act 1 ends. Act 2 begins with a time skip. Heimerdinger and Jace are getting ready to celebrate 200 years of Piltover, and they reference Stanwyck Padidley, a character that was previously really important in the retconned lore, but now it is just a cool reference. Anyway, it is revealed that since Act 1, based on Jace's research, the Hextech gates were created, and we get a shot of the city which reveals who really rose to power. Namely, you can see the tall house of the Kiraman family, and you can see that Mel started building the Medarda headquarters. When the Hex Gate is in use, you can see the map actually points at Noxus, hinting that there is a lot of trading happening between Piltover and Noxus now. And yes, the Hex Gate works by just shooting Zeppelins across the world. Anyway, then it cuts into the Progress Day, which is a day when Piltover celebrates inventions. And you can see Jace became a new icon. Caitlyn comes back, she is now revealed to be part of the Wardens. And yes, this guy is a reoccurring appearance. In case you're wondering who this is the director of Fortiche. After that, the mysterious masked man who is part of the Firelights enters the docks. He interrupts a Shimmer shipment, and Powder, who is now known as Jinx, stops the heist. Of course, she gets schizo after she starts remembering Vi, she goes crazy and burns the entire shipment. all while the masked man escapes. Meanwhile, Victor and Jace present their improvements to Hextech inventions. They created a Hextech gemstone. The difference between a crystal and a gem is that gem is cut, which is why gem is smooth. Also, it is just a lot more stable. And they are already trying to use it in the Atlas Gauntlet, which are originally supposed to be used for mining, and in the Hex Claw, which is a laser tool that is supposed to be used by the Artificers. Heimerdinger is impressed, but he wants to make it all safer before they release it. But of course, Victor and Jace think it is production ready now, and so there is a disagreement. Meanwhile, Caitlyn investigates the burning shipment, and she finds the infamous man from Vi's fight. However, Marcus interrupts Caitlyn because she is not a real detective, and instead he just takes the man into the prison. Which is where we get a montage of how modern Zaun became. Mostly this means that there is a very common use of shimmer now. And yes, Silco is now the head of the last drop, essentially taking Vander's spot, with Savika being his right hand. And it is revealed that Jinx essentially became Silco's adopted daughter. Now up in Piltover, the council is having a fundraiser party, where Mel confirms she wants to win Jace's heart for power and influence. So later she talks to Jace and she suggests that he should lead Piltover. Meanwhile, Jinx has another mental breakdown in her hideout, telling herself that she is not weak. Which is where it is revealed that she has mannequins of Milo and Clagger. Yep, she is refusing to let go of the past. Victor is then shown as visibly sick as he is running out of time. With Jace now being the face of progress, he is giving the speech. And he takes Heimerdinger's side in not revealing what they are working on before it is safe. This disappoints Mel and Victor. In front of the building where Jace has this speech, Caitlyn is holding a post as Jinx starts a fire nearby. This fire turns into an explosion that knocks Caitlyn down and kills 6 other wardens. Of course, all of this is just a distraction, so that Jinx can get up to the council and steal the gemstone. So the council is now scared of Zaun, because now, on top of their Chemtech augments, they also have a Hextech gemstone. With Jace being so close to Hextech, Mel proposes that Jace joins the council, by which she would essentially get a second seat in the council as long as she can control Jace. Meanwhile, Jinx goes back to her hideout and she starts to experiment with the gemstone. Silco comes in, he is mad that Jinx is causing all the chaos in Piltover, but he calms down after he sees the gem she secured. Later, Caitlyn recovered from the explosion and she continued her investigation. She knows that the heist is linked to Shimmer and the Hextech gates. This is where Jace told Caitlyn that she would not be holding posts anymore, as her parents just got her out for her own safety. Caitlyn doesn't care and she continues her investigation in the Stillwater Hold, which is the prison where the infamous man was taken. And we learn that here he was beaten by Vi again. Caitlyn would like to speak to him, but unfortunately Vi broke his jaw so he can't speak. So Caitlyn's only option to learn something is to speak with Vi, which is where we get to episode 5. This episode starts with Caitlyn's flashback, where she is in a shooting competition competing with Grayson. She won the competition, however, Grayson let her win. After which it cuts back to the prison where she's talking to Vi. Vi notices that Caitlyn has leads to powder and so she cooperates. Of course, Caitlyn needs to find Silco, but she realizes she can only do it with Vi's help. So she got Jace, who is now the head of the council, to sign a release form for Vi. After which, Marcus gives a speech at a Piltover funeral. These were the 6 wardens who died from Jinx's explosion. And he even visits Grayson's grave. Which is where it is revealed that Marcus has a deal with Silco. Which is why he is constantly trying to stop Caitlyn from investigating him. Of course, Marcus wants to arrest Jinx because she's dangerous, but Silco won't give her up. And Silco revealed that the Zeppelin shipment was his. After which, he just pays Marcus off. Then the scene goes into the inside of the Hex Gates, where Victor and Jace are now watching over it to make sure it is safe. So Marcus arrives, Jace tells him that he wants to investigate, and naturally Marcus gets nervous because he does not want to do that because he has a deal with Silco. Victor then starts coughing blood, showing us that he is running out of time, and he wants to work on Hextech faster to save his own life. However, unaware of the situation, Jace wants to slow down to be safe, which is where Victor gets those weird magical visions. Then it is revealed that besides the gemstone, Jinx also stole Jace's notebook, and she is using it to recreate Victor's and Jace's stabilization. Of course, the magic reminds her of the incident, and so she stops working on it. Back in Piltover, Vi is now enjoying being free after years of imprisonment, which is where we get the parkour montage of her getting down to Zaun, with Caitlyn trying to follow her. Vi then finds two Zaunite goons and she steals their clothing to blend in. The red jacket goes to Vi, and the purple outfit goes to Caitlyn. Back in the lab, Victor works on the Hex core, and he started approaching magic as a living force. He even suggests that the Arcane can learn. Back in Zaun, Vi and Caitlyn visit Jericho's fish stand, where they got a lead from him. Up in Piltover, Mel is trying to gain even more power using Jace in the Opera House. Fun fact, the guy performing the music is indeed the director of Arcane's music. Anyway, here Mel reveals that the other counselors hate Jace, because he is slowing down progress and businesses. Though Mel still stays on Jace's side, and she pushes him into making a deal with everyone, so that Mel could have a pawn in the game that is friends with everyone. Jinx then visits the old arcade, where she has another mental breakdown, and that's kinda it. So Vi and Caitlyn visit the brothel. Here we can find one famous guy dressed as the Wolf of Kindred. Remember him, alright? And also Gimpy Yordle. That is also where we heard the line, "You're hot, cupcake." Anyway, Vi leaves Caitlyn to enjoy the brothel, while Vi learns what really happened to Zaun while she was gone. Later, Marcus meets with Silco and tells him that the Wardens are now after him. Silco gives him a false, misdirecting proof that the Firelights are behind all of this, and for a moment, Marcus is considering just ending it all, blowing himself up together with Silco. But that is just in his head. So next, Silco pushes Jinx into using the gemstone to create a weapon. Back in Zaun, Vi learns that Silco now has full power over Zaun. And she learns that Silco's right hand is a regular in the brothel, and she would get a lead on them. Of course, that right hand is Savika. This is also when Vi learned that Caitlyn is into women. At the end of this day, Mel makes a move onto Jace, and she essentially logs him in as an investment. Meanwhile, as Jace is partying, Victor is working hard. In fact, while Jace and Mel are doing it, Victor is dying. Indeed, this is when Victor's blood was mixed in with the Hex core for the first time. Ironically, this scene might be also teasing that Mel might be possibly pregnant with Jace's child. And to anyone who knows Mbessa's lore, just remember that this might be a possibility, because that would be some really cool foreshadowing for a possible future Chosen of the Wolf. Anyway, Silco then gives Jinx a history lesson about him and Vander. He tells Jinx that he let himself die to be born as a stronger man. And in that way, Silco lets Powder die so that Jinx can be born. And then we get a story montage. Vi follows the lead on Silco's right hand, Marcus gets more and more nervous from Silco corrupting him, Mel wakes up alone without Jace, and Victor is dying. So following up on this setup, Vi gets to fight Savika. Here they both fight with a decent mutual respect, because they are both fighting for what they believe is the best for Zaun. Vi actually manages to beat her and she asks about Jinx. Savika tells her that Jinx now works for Silco, which shocks Vi, and gives Savika the opportunity to stab her. Before she can kill her, Vi is saved by Caitlyn, and the two bond over that moment. Down in the basement, Jinx makes a significant progress on the weapon, and Silco learns that Vi is alive, which is Jinx's only living link to Powder. Which is where episode 6 starts. This is where we get Victor's flashback. From his birth, as the story puts it, he was a cripple from Zaun. And as the other kids were playing in the sumps, he was creating inventions. And soon he stumbled upon Singed and Rio. Singed revealed that Rio was a form of life he cultivated, and that Rio was dying, but he wanted to keep the mutation alive at all cost. Victor then offered his help, which is where we get to present days. In the present day, Heimer meets Victor. Heimerdinger feels sorry about his condition and he references the fact that he is immortal, which is where he says the line, "The brightest minds burn the fastest." In the Medarda headquarters, Mel is painting Noxus, which is her home. Jace then tells Mel that Victor is dying, and he reveals his feelings towards Mel, which makes Mel a little bit nervous. Maybe Jace was her political asset, But at the end of the day, maybe Mel also developed some of her own feelings towards him. Anyway, Victor being Victor, he loses his mind over dealing with the hex core. He realizes that his blood fused with it, and so he tries to control it with his own body. Jinx then meets Theorem at the bar and calls him Chuck. From him she learns that someone fought Savika. And she learned it was a girl whom Silco was after, so Jinx got curious. With Vi still being injured from the fight with Savika, Vi and Caitlyn retreat further down zone. They are being chased by Silco's goons, but soon they lose them. So Savika goes back to Silco's office and tells him that they lost them somewhere down in zone. But when Silco turns, it is Jinx sitting in his chair. She manages to tie Savika up and interrogate her. From her, she learns that Silco is after Vi, which freaks her out because she doesn't even know that Vi is alive. Meanwhile, the reason why Silco was not in his office is because he was visiting Marcus's family. Specifically, he was playing with his daughter Ren. The reason he was here is because Marcus ensured Silco that Vi was dead, but now it was obvious she wasn't. So Silco was now threatening Marcus's family over the fact that he should remove Vi. Back in the lab, Victor realized that the hex core is now reacting to life. It can cultivate flowers, but soon everything around it always dies. Heimerdinger sees this experiment, he sees that life is now bonding with magic, and he remembers events from the past. So, he tells them to destroy it. Of course, Jace sides with Victor and he refuses. Which is where Victor hints that he knows someone who could help them. Now down in zone, Caitlyn and Vi ended up in Vi's old house. And they find Huck, an old friend who is now addicted to Shimmer. With his help, Caitlyn is able to get some Shimmer medication to help Vi. Up in Piltover, Marcus presents Silco's misdirection to Jace, proving that it is all the work of the Firelights. He also told Jace that Vi was now released from her prison, and that it was done on Jace's order, so he asks if he can help with the situation. But Jace says they're fine. So, Heimerdinger calls for a meeting at the council so he can tell everyone how divided everyone became. Low-key, he is panicking about Hextech potentially being weaponized. But Jace stops him by telling him that Piltover is in danger. Zaun is constantly threatening them, and so they have to do something. But because Heimerdinger is not threatened by mortality, he wants to take things slow. And so, he gets kicked out. What's cool is that this vote is actually a relationship avalanche. The vote had to be unanimous. But because Jace voted for it, Mel had to follow him. Because Mel voted, our old friend who keeps getting gifts from Mel also had to follow her. His drunkard friend, of course, was in the same boat. And it all trickled down until Heimerdinger was let go. Down in zone, Caitlyn saves Vi using the medicine. She then learns that Vi's parents were killed by the enforcers, and they meet Silco outside. Vi learned that they were snitched out by Huck himself. To escape, they bring down the entire building. Meanwhile, after learning that Vi is actually alive, Jinx lights up the blue torch to let Vi know where she is. At the same time, Marcus closes the bridge. He is doing this to make sure Caitlyn and Vi don't return from zone. Which is where we get another flashback of young Victor. Here he saw Rio dying, which transitions into Rio in the present days. Singed is still keeping Rio alive. So Silco then finally comes back to his office, and he is called a liar for not telling Jinx about Vi. Of course, Vi follows the torch and eventually she meets with Powder. The two hug each other and the world is good for a few seconds. Vi tries to explain the situation, but Caitlyn arrives, Jinx realizes that Savika wasn't lying, Vi was working with an enforcer, and so Jinx has a breakdown, not sure who to trust. Meanwhile, the masked man and the Firelights appear to steal the gemstone. They successfully do that, they also beat Vi and take her with them, and they leave Jinx alone again, which is the end of Act 2. Act 3 begins with a Firelight music video. Here, Vi and Caitlyn are tied in their hideout, and Echo is revealed to be the masked man who is also the leader of Firelights. Naturally, he asks about the gemstone and Jinx. He also refuses to call her Powder because Powder is dead. And he is suspicious about Vi because she is working with Caitlyn. But of course, Vi hugs him and the two recall their childhood. Down in zone, Singed is using a microscope to have a look at how the hex core is reacting to life. He knows it is dangerous and so he offers Victor Shimmer to help with violent transmutations. But he warns Victor that everyone will hate him for using Shimmer. He even says love and legacy are the sacrifices for progress. And in fact, that is the reason why he parted ways with Heimerdinger. As a response, Victor says that Jace will understand. Back in Piltover, Jace is now hard at work. He tells Mel that he feels bad about kicking out Heimerdinger, and Mel reveals that she is also an exile, but a part of her still loves her family. Also, Victor just disappeared, and so Jace now wants to find him. Of course, Mel offered her help with that. Silco then had a meeting with Savika. He learns that the Camp Barons of Zaun scheduled assembly. Before that, Silco wanted to go out and find Jinx, but Savika told him that she'll come back on her own once she's ready. For once, Silco is the one who follows that advice. Jinx then returned wounded to her hideout, and she started using a stapler to fix her wound. Which is where she realized that Caitlyn is someone that should be probably removed from Vi. Vi then sees how beautiful the Firelight's hideout is. After Vander died, apparently Silco flooded Zaun with Shimmer, which turned everyone into an addict, so they built a haven. Echo then tells Vi that Powder is gone, and that only Jinx remains now, which is when he showed Vi the mural. Now back on the closed bridge, riots started. This is also when Jace finally found Victor and learned that he was down in Zaun. So of course he was mad, but he also helped him get through the blockade. Here Victor also lied and he told Jace he didn't learn anything. All while he kept the Shimmer he got from Singed. Down in Zaun, the Baron meeting started. All the Barons were skeptical. They wanted to trade back the gemstone for reopening the bridge. But Silco offered them a more violent option. The people of Zaun would not trade, they would fight for resources. So he gassed everyone and asserted dominance. Up in Piltover, Mel learns that Noxus believes that Piltover now looks weak. And Mel says that it's all happening too soon, Jace wasn't ready. But unfortunately, she got a message that her mother was already on her way. Down in the hideout, Caitlyn got untied. And Echo offered to escort her back to Piltover, but nothing more. Jinx then finally got back to Silco's office. She faced him and called him a liar for hiding the truth about Vi. He tried to defend himself by telling her that Vi was looking for the gemstone, not for her. By which he lied, and he also pushed the Jinx towards completing the weapon. In the hideout, Caitlyn then talks to Echo. She explains to him that everyone believes that the Firelights are working for Silco. Echo then learns from Caitlyn what the gemstone can really do, and the two decide to work together to bring the gem back to Jace, so that he can use it to help the people of Zaun. Up in Piltover, Victor and Jace then defuse Jinx's bomb. And Mel suggests they should use Hextech to make weapons. Of course, she's being pressured by Noxus now, but she says that they are gonna use them to defend themselves. Victor refuses, and Jace thinks about it. After which, there is a quick story recap montage. The Firelights group up to travel to Piltover. Victor carves runes into his leg and is ready to fuse with the Hex core. The core then quickly fuses with his body and is refusing to let go. Jace thinks back to the times when magic was destructive. And Jinx waits at the bridge, which takes us to the famous bridge scene. As they get to the bridge, Vi decides to go back to Zaun to find Powder, which leaves Echo and Caitlyn to keep going to get the gem to Jace. So Vi and Caitlyn hug to say their goodbye, and Jinx sees them. Of course, at the end of the bridge, Caitlyn and Echo get stopped by the Wardens. There, Caitlyn shows Marcus the proof that Silco is behind everything. But because Marcus has a deal with Silco, who is now threatening his family, he has no other choice than to kill them. So he shoots Echo and then he hesitates to shoot Caitlyn, giving Jinx the time to blow up the entire bridge, which destroyed the blockade and killed Marcus. Hearing the explosion, Vi then runs back to Caitlyn. Of course, Jinx sees them together again. She tries to shoot them, but Echo jumps in to save the day. So we get a really epic fight scene between Echo and Jinx, as he's buying time for Vi and Caitlyn to escape. Of course, the scene ends with Jinx blowing both of them up. And that takes us to episode 8, which is where we got some flashbacks from Mel. There, Ambessa is revealed to be Mel's mother, who mentions that her grandfather took her back to the aftermath of the Battle of Hildenard, which is where she was asked to pick up swords, and for every sword she would get a piece of gold. Of course, the truth was, her grandfather just wanted Mbessa to know death. What's really cool is that all of this was referenced in Mbessa's bio. And here it is revealed that Mel also has a brother called Kino. In this scene, they were in a room with the conquered throne, and Mel started talking about how she would renew this place. Mbessa then mentioned that this throne could be hers if she can prove that she can take it. So they bring in a royalty of the old regime. Mel says that they should spare her to show that they are merciful. But Mbessa says that they should kill her, otherwise they would have to kill a lot more people. And so the girl dies. After the battle between Jinx and Echo is over, Silco arrives to pick up Jinx's near-dead body. There it turns out that Jinx also had the gem. In the morning, Mel and Jace also arrive. Jace can't handle all the death and so he throws up. And just like Mbessa, once again you can see that Mel is forced to know death. Vi and Caitlyn then sneak into Caitlyn's room, which is where her mother bursts out with a rifle. And then they have a friendly conversation. Caitlyn explains that the council has no idea what's happening in Zaun. So, her mother schedules a meeting with the council. But Caitlyn and Vi would have to present their case on their own. Down in Zaun, Silco brings Jinx's body to Singed. Singed can see that he can save her, but he knows that Silco would interfere and so he drugs him. That is also where Singed reveals that he also once had a daughter. Meanwhile, in the last drop, Finn tries to sway Savika against Silco. And up in Piltover, Mbessa arrives. Here Mel addresses the fact that she was banished and yet now her mother is visiting her. Mbessa kinda ignores it and then she mentions that Kino died because he crossed the wrong man. Also, apparently from her spies, Mbessa knows about Jace, and she knows that he can potentially make weapons. So Mbessa leaves to taste the local cuisine, which is where the guy dressed as a wolf comes back. It makes sense with Mbessa being a chosen of the wolf. So in the Kiraman house, Caitlyn tells Vi that they would present their case to the council, and then the two share an intimate moment. Meanwhile, Jinx is getting pumped with Shimmer. And of course, she is getting psychotic. When Silco wakes up from being drugged, Jinx is already gone. But then Heimerdinger comes back and now he is visiting Zaun. And he sees how everyone in Zaun is in a really bad shape. So he walks to the bridge, he finds Echo's hoverboard and then he finds wounded Echo. And then he offers his help to get him to safety. Next, Jace visits Mbessa to negotiate weapons. At first, Jace sees Mbessa as arrogant, but she tells him that without weapons, Piltover will not be able to defend itself. Which is pretty much what Mel told him before. So now the council had a meeting. The current situation was that all shipments were delayed, their former sheriff betrayed them, and so now they had to act. Which is when Caitlyn and Vi entered the room to explain the situation. The people of Zaun were poor and starving and ravaged by Shimmer, all while living in the fear of the crime lords who were the Camp Barons. Especially Silco. Of course, Bolbok mentioned that they investigated Silco numerous times, but every time that happened, it was done by Marcus. So Jace asks about the misdirection bomb, and Vi reveals it was made by Jinx, who now also had the gemstone. This immediately pushed Jace into fighting back, although everyone else still wanted to try negotiations. This triggered Vi, who knew it was impossible to do that with Silco. So she leaves, Caitlyn runs after her, and so we get the oil and water moment, where Vi doubts the two can even be together. Meanwhile, Victor, for the first time, successfully fused with the core, and he renewed his own leg. So he tried walking, and he started running. As that is happening, the Hex core is taking on a more flesh-like appearance. So Victor pushes the limits and he carves the runes all across his body. And it so happens to be that he is approached by his assistant, who happens to be in love with him. So as Victor taps into the core again, the magic leashes out and his assistant turns into dust. Meanwhile, Jace is using Hextech to craft his own hammer. Vi visits him because he was the only one who also wanted to fight. She also picks up the Atlas gauntlets without asking. And she offers that the two should team up to destroy Silco's Shimmer supplies. And Jace agrees. So together with the Wardens, they take over the Shimmer facility, but an alarm is raised and so they have to fight a bunch of Camtech tanks. Of course they win, but Jace accidentally kills the son of one of the Camp Barons, who was just a civilian. After this, Jace can see how dangerous Hextech really is. Meanwhile, Caitlyn is taking a shower and gets kidnapped by Jinx, which is where episode 9 starts. In the aftermath of the battle, Jace regrets it, but Vi wants to keep going after Silco, so she destroys Silco's supplies. Later, Silco arrives and Rani, who is one of the camp barons, notices that her son is dead, and she blames Silco for this. So that is another swayed baron. Victor is then mourning the death of his assistant and notices that she was continuing his work. Full of hate, Victor then turns towards the Hex core and tries to destroy it, but he can't. The core is simply linked to him now. Meanwhile, Mel is mad at Ambessa for talking to Jace and for making him make weapons. Ambessa simply wants to speed up that process because it would happen eventually. And she admitted that she banished Mel here because Mel was making Ambessa weak. Having to take care of her children simply made her sentimental, which is not what a warlord should be. And there she also invited Mel to go back to Noxus with her. Down in Zone, Victor spills the ashes of his assistant into the sump. He also considered jumping, but Jace interrupted him. The two then started talking about how it all started and where they were now. Which is where Victor asked Jace to destroy the core. And Jace promised he would do it. The Barons then confront Silco. They want to overthrow him, but Sevika stays loyal to Silco, and so she kills Finn instead. Also, as a fun fact, Sevika now has Finn's lighter. Anyway, Jace sent a letter to Silco so they could negotiate. Silco accepts and they meet far away from the city. Silco gives Jace a list of demands. Stuff like free trade routes as well as unrestricted access to the Hex Gates. Jace thinks it is too much and he is confident that with Hextech weapons they would annihilate Zaun. And so Jace also asked that he would stop his production of Shimmer, he would give them back the Hextech gemstone, and he would give them Jinx. But that is something Silco would never do. So the trade was Jinx for the nation of Zaun. So, down in the Firelight hideout, Echo was escorted here with Heimerdinger, and Silco visits Vander's memorial, where he is just processing what's happening. But of course, Jinx was there too, and so she kidnapped him. Vi, still holding the Atlas gauntlets, then visits Sevika, and a really cool fight breaks out. During this fight, one of Vi's gauntlets gets destroyed, and so does Sevika's arm. Of course, they both end up collapsing, and Jinx kidnaps Vi too. Jace then calls for a council meeting. He thinks that he struck a deal with Silco, not knowing that he would never give Jinx up. And so he tells everyone else that there will be peace for the independence of Zaun, which angered everyone. Which is where the scene cuts to Jinx setting up a family meeting. Everyone was now at a big table, and she tells Vi that Silco is not the one who made Jinx. It was Vi. Vi then tells her that she was always looking for her, but someone was always in the way. Jinx kinda doubts that. And so, during this family meeting, she was hoping to assess her life. Everyone was here. There was Silco and Vander's gauntlets and Milo and Clagger. Also, Caitlyn and Vi are also there, and there are 2 more available seats for Powder and Jinx, giving Jinx the option to choose who she's gonna become. She then gives Vi a gun and tells her to remove Caitlyn to get Powder back. Of course, that's not gonna happen. And so Jinx picks up the gun, Vi tells her that they can just run away together, and Silco shouts out that Piltover wanted peace with Zaun in exchange for Jinx, but he would never give her up. But that talk gets interrupted by Caitlyn, who freed herself. She picked up Jinx's machine gun and now was ready to shoot. Although, Jinx knocks her down regardless. At that point, Jinx doesn't know what to do, she doesn't even want to shoot Caitlyn because it is Vi's friend after all. And so she goes schizo, she shoots at the voices and she accidentally kills Silco. Then there was some long thinking about what just happened and Jinx decided to become Jinx. She then takes the gem, she slots it into her complete weapon, which turns out to be a rocket launcher, and she shoots at the council, right as they all believe they are striking a peace deal. After which, there is a short montage of everything that happened, including the fact that Echo is now with Heimerdinger, Singed is in the process of creating Warwick, and the council room is in very big danger, which is where Arcane 1 got off. I hope that's all you really wanted to remember, because this ended up way too long. I really just wanted to make one more video before Arcane 2 dropped. And here we are!